All righty. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Happy New Year. I'm going to ask y'all to dial it in for a moment, and we'll go ahead and get started. It's on the count of three. 1, 2, 3. Shh. There you go. You guys are awesome at that. I appreciate y'all. I am excited for today. The energy is high. It is so good to see you guys. I hope you are feeling the activity in the market right now. If you've got a buyer in the car, a new listing on the market, or closing already in the new year, raise your hand for me. Let's see it. There you go. There is activity. I'm telling you guys right now, January historically for the company is our slowest month of the year, but not this January. We are rocking and rolling from y'all's hard activity. Thank you, Matthew. And so if you are not on the phone and doing your activities right now, I am telling you, you are missing out. Because the people in your phone, they are buying, they are selling, or they know somebody that is. And so we have heard a ton of success stories in the last 2 weeks of people saying, hey, that listing that I had sitting on the market, it's finally getting activity. We're getting under contract. My buyers are getting off the fence. They're being decisive and taking action. So I'm telling you, lean heavy into your activities right now because the activity is out, the success is out there, and it's yours for the taking. We are thrilled that you guys made time out of your day to come here. You're going to get some really great information. Dr. Perryman's going to be on mic, and we are streaming live. We are recording, and we do have the PDFs of the information, so we'll be releasing that later on, so keep an eye on your emails and the Facebook page. Dr. Perryman gave us handouts instead of slides, so you should have a handout on your page. If you do, or on your chair. If you do not have one, raise your hand, and Nikki over here in the pink shirt is going to get you squared away. But we want you guys to have those handouts so you can follow along because the data is super valuable. All righty. Salo, you got some slides for us. We're going to kick off with our usual Y4C2Ts real quick. So if you'll just repeat after me, win-win, or no deal. There we go. Let's try it again. Win-win. Or no deal. Y'all, I do the red, y'all do the black. It's like at church. You know, finish off my sentence here. All right. Trust, teamwork, equity, and success. Okay, so if you're in our company, you know our values and how we run our business. If you're a guest and you're not with a brokerage that's got some strong values that help you guide your business and your life, come see me afterwards. That's my one plug, and we'll move on, all right? Salo, hit me with the next slide, brother. All right, MREA Monday. We missed this week's because of the frost, and so I've had several of you ask, are we still going to be going over that episode? The answer is yes. So it's coming up. It'll be on social media. It's an agent out of Houston, 24 years old, so 50 homes his first year through Instagram doing builder promotions. So if you want to learn about that, come join us 8:30 on the 3rd floor. Breakfast is there because I know realtors love to be fed, so we got your back on that. But come join us 8:30. It's a great way to kick off your week with some momentum and some team building. Our next team meeting, hopefully you came to the last one. It was around buyers and what to do at open houses and how to convert. We got some great feedback. We're going to do the same thing, but on listings, primarily around staging and price reductions and how to get them moved. So we have got an all-star lineup coming to pour into you guys. We've got Jen Clough, who sold 100 homes last year. We've got Helen Guajardo, who's one of the top agents in the city. Sarah Comet, who's the #1 agent on Maloof Group International. And Monique Slater, who's one of the top agents in the city also. So you have got an all-star lineup, a powerhouse to pour into you guys, and you guys will get to do Q&A with them. So next team meeting, February 5th, 11:30. Next one, Salo. All right, IABS open house. A lot of you guys have got your IABSs updated, so you're in compliance with Trek. Yay. If only Trek could support us the way we have to support them all their time, but that's all right. If you're not doing your CE right now, you don't know, but those that are, they know it's a pain point. Anyways, we've got our next open house, so if you haven't updated it and you don't know how to update it, our tech team will get you squared away. It's called an open house, but you don't all have to show up at once. It's more of a pop-in, so don't feel like you have to be there right at 12:30. Anytime in that window, show up, bring your laptop and your passwords, and the tech team will get you all squared away. Content Day, we have our next 2 content days coming up. Our luxury content day is February 11th. That's going to be out in Bernie. And our next builder content day is going to be Wednesday, February 27th, somewhere in San Antonio. Google that address. If you haven't been to our content days, all you got to do is show up and look pretty. Our videographer, Mr. Salo right here, is going to be there. He's going to help you guys out. We got the B-roll. We got the scripts. We'll tell you where to stand, where to walk, what to say. We're going to package that all together for you and send it to you for free. That's our value to you guys as a way to help you get on social media, because if you're not there, you're missing out. So plug that into your calendar. It's a free event. If you're not good on camera, or you don't think you're good on camera, or you're shy, get over it. Everybody is the first time, but I'll tell you, there's a lot of first-timers that came to the content days and said, guess what? I survived. I didn't die. It wasn't scary. That we make it easy on you guys. So just plug it in and be there. We'll help you out. Next one. Valentine's Day. 2 years ago, we did our bingo event for Valentine's Day. Everybody loved it. It fell off of our radar last year. That's my bad, but we're bringing it back. So mark your calendar, Friday, February 13th, 1 to 3 p.m. Bingo, ping pong, food, drinks. Ooh, everybody likes drinks. It's going to be a great time. We've got a lot of door prizes, so put that on your calendar, and we will see you there. That's going to be brought to you by our ambassador group, by the way, so we're super excited for them. And then February 12th, Helen is also doing a standalone class for us around neighborhood marketing. If you know Helen Guajardo and you've ever looked at her business, she is like the queen of Rogers Ranch. She sold over 200 homes in Rogers Ranch through her farming efforts, and she is nice enough to bring us her process and how she puts together her farm, her materials, how she puts it on autopilot so that it continues to feed her business. So if you want to come and learn directly from an amazing rock star in the San Antonio market, that's your opportunity on the 12th. All righty. Of course, we can't make any of our events happen without our amazing sponsors, especially our builder sponsors. We're very blessed in San Antonio. I say all the time that we have really good relationships with our builders, because if you've ever done real estate or know people in other markets, it's not always the case. And our builders work really closely with our realtors, especially the heritage realtors. So we are thankful for them. So D.R. Horton, Gina, I know you are somewhere in the room. Come on down, my friend. You got a couple minutes, and she's going to tell us a little bit about what's happening with D.R. Horton this month. Y'all give her a welcome.
Hello. Hi. Hello, I'm Gina. I work for D.R. Horton. I've been with D.R. Horton for about 8 years now, and who doesn't like 6% commission? Woo! So we are America's builder. We have inventory throughout the city, Comfort, Bernie, New Braunfels, all of the outskirts. So you just give us a call. I'm one of our 4 online sales counselors. We did leave a flyer on your chair so that you can scan the QR code and get a full list of our homes for our red tag sale. So you've got homes up to 6% commission across the city. We're offering closing costs paid and as low as a 3.99% interest rate with DHI Mortgage if they qualify with DHI Mortgage. That's our in-house lender. So I wanted you to take note. Just go ahead and take note of the phone number, email. Anytime you're on the go, you can scan this. You can get a list. If you're not familiar with where everything's located, call us. We're here to help. We can get you a custom list of inventory for your buyer, directions to the model, set up your appointment with your favorite agent, any of the above. So give us a call. Feel free to utilize us. D.R. Horton takes pride in having the online sales concierge available for everybody. It costs you nothing. So use us, call us. Let us help you find the right home for your buyers.
Awesome.
Okay, take care.
Thank you so much, Gina. And I know several of y'all have already hopped on that red tag sale. I see those commissions, so congratulations. Keep them going. Support team, am I missing anything before I move into our main event? Okay, very good. I'm ADD, so I always have to check with them. It's not a joke. My wife knows. She's right here. She just rolled her eyes like, oh, I'm squirrely. All right, so real quick, we are super excited. We've got Dr. Perryman here today. He is the CEO of the Perryman Group and one of the most respected economists in the country. He holds degrees from Baylor and Rice universities, has written thousands of articles and academic papers, and is a nationally recognized voice on NPR and other major media outlets. His firm has advised more than 3,000 clients, including Fortune 100 companies, top technology and energy firms, government leaders around the world. Often called the unofficial state economist of Texas, Dr. Perryman is known for breaking down complex economic trends into insights that are clear, powerful, and immediately useful. So make sure to take notes because his data is going to be immediately useful. Use it on your socials, use it in your letters and your marketing. We are incredibly lucky to have him today with us, or have him with us today. So if you will, help me give him a warm welcome, Dr. Perryman.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate that very much. I appreciate the kind introduction. They tell me, I don't count this stuff, but the people who count tell me I've given over 4,000 speeches in my life, which I guess means I've been introduced over 4,000 times. And of all the introductions I've ever had, and I'm not kidding, of all the introductions I've ever had, that was by far the most recent. So I really mean that. From the bottom of my heart, I mean that, you know. Yeah. I grew up in a small town over in East Texas, and it's a little bit bigger now. It became pretty successful after I left. But when I was there, it was so small, just to give you a little bit more background about myself, it was so small we had to take driver's education and sex education in the same car. And when I told my wife that, she said, "Ray, that makes perfect sense. You can't drive either." So just wanted you to know that I get a lot of respect at home. You know? But no, it's a pleasure to be with you today. I'm going to talk about, I guess the speech will only be 3 minutes because there's nothing going on in the economy right now, right? So no, I'm going to talk about a lot of stuff, big picture, national stuff, local stuff, housing market stuff, all kinds of things. I will tell you, when I started, as he mentioned, I do stuff all over the world, all over the country. I have never been shy about saying what I think. USA Today has called me an equal opportunity offender because I tend to make people mad on both sides of the aisle. But I will tell you, in doing this for almost 50 years now, I have never, to the best of my knowledge, we release billions of numbers every year. To the best of my knowledge, I've never released a number that was a Republican or a Democrat or a liberal or a conservative. And so consequently, at times, I've made everybody mad. But I will say that to say what I'm going to tell you, you know, some of it, whichever party you're in, some of it you probably won't like, but it is based on factual research and opinions that come out of that, and not anything that I can't afford to say this because of that. I don't do any of that stuff, and I get in trouble for it all the time. But anyway, so we'll just start out. There's a lot of these things that are kind of big national issues, but they really affect you here locally, and they're in the news all the time, and I don't want to dodge them. I want to kind of walk through them and kind of give you a perspective on what they mean for you. The first one I'll talk about is tariffs. Now, that's not controversial at all, is it? but anyway, there's a lot of misinformation about tariffs out there right now. One thing that's a misinformation is people think the other countries pay the tariffs. In fact, just last week when we were threatening tariffs on Europe, we were saying, you will pay us another 10%, 15% tariff. We tell people that all the time. That's not true. We pay the tariffs. Now, the other countries pay a little bit of it, and I'll kind of explain to you how that happens. But if you've ever been out of the country, and I'm sure many of you have, if you've ever been out of the country and you bought something, when you bought it, that country didn't send us any money. That merchant didn't send the U.S. government any money. In fact, they didn't even know where you were from, probably. Well, being from Texas, you probably told them. But regardless, they have no idea. When you come back to the country, they got this little card you fill out. You can do it electronically. Now, you used to have to actually do it with a pen and that sort of thing. And you say what you bought. If it's subject to a tariff, you pay that tariff before you cross the threshold at customs to bring that good in the United States. If it's a truck coming across the bridge at Laredo, it goes in a bonded warehouse, they pay that tariff before they bring it in. If it's a ship to the Port of Houston, same thing. If it's an airplane at DFW Airport, same thing. Whoever receives the goods here pays the tariff. Now, how the other countries end up paying some of it is just kind of common sense. I mean, you guys are in business, you know what I'm talking about. If all of a sudden you've been supplying somebody for a long time, and all of a sudden for no reason that you had anything to do with, the price of your goods goes up 10, 15, 20%, if you want to keep the business, you might say, okay, I'll eat a little bit of that for you. You know, I won't pass all that along to you. There's been a lot of studies done on this recently. So far, that's about 4%. The other countries are paying about 4%. We're paying about 96%. Our numbers show, looking at some tariffs that have been around for a long time, that will probably settle out at about between 8 and 10%, because over time, you know, you will see a little bit more of it. But we're going to pay the vast majority of the tariffs. The other thing you hear a lot is, well, yeah, I guess we know that we're paying them, but we kind of have to do that because these people have been ripping us off for years. You know, that we've been buying their stuff, they hadn't been buying our stuff. That doesn't mean they're ripping us off. It means we need more of their stuff than they need of our stuff. And to kind of walk you through that a little bit, I can give you a fairly simple example. My office is in Waco. It's always been in Waco, but I live in Odessa. Why in the world does he live in Odessa, you might ask? because the beautiful lady I married 34 years ago, at the time I married her, happened to be the mayor of Odessa. And one of the basic laws of economics is if you marry the mayor, you move. Okay, so I ended up moving, and so anyway, there's been a lady literally 25 years or so has cut my hair that whole time. About 25 years, she's been the person that cut my hair, and she's and you know, I get in there once a month, 10 times a year, something like that. I don't know. It costs about $40 to cut my hair. So when she started, I had a lot more, but the price didn't go down. But anyway, so I've paid her $400 or $500 a year for a long time now. Okay, and she's a nice lady, but not once in that entire time has she hired me to give a speech. Has she hired me to do an impact study? Has she hired me to do a forecast, a market analysis, or anything else? Why? Because she doesn't need that. Okay? I need her service. She doesn't need my service. So I've had a trade deficit with her for 25 years. Okay? Now, because that's all a trade deficit is. You buy more of their stuff and they buy of your stuff. That's what a trade deficit is. Well, suppose all of a sudden we had a tariff on that haircut. And so all of a sudden there's a $10 tariff on my $40 haircut, 25% tariff, okay? Several things could happen. She could say, Ray, my margins are so thin, man, I'm sorry, you have to pay $50. She could say, Ray, you've been such a good customer that I'll just absorb this and you just keep paying $40. Or we could agree on 45 or 42 or 48 or whatever. We can make any kind of deal we wanted to. What would not happen is I would not start cutting my hair, okay? Because that doesn't make sense. And that's kind of what the world economy is about, is we kind of all do, if we keep this mess out of the way, things like tariffs, we kind of all do what we do best, and we trade, and it tends to work pretty well. And the basic premise of this, which I think is one of the 10 or 15 best ideas humanity's ever come up with, if you had to make a list of the greatest things in the world, I mean, things like Einstein's relativity and Texas barbecue, I mean, the best stuff that's ever happened. If you made a list of all that stuff, I would put this principle on that list. It's a simple principle, and you use it in your business all the time, whether you realize it or not, called comparative advantage, okay? And you probably had to suffer through it, and if you ever took an economics class in college, you had to suffer through it briefly. And if you did have to take one of those classes, I'm so sorry. They're so boring. But anyway, it's a really simple notion. The math was developed, and the idea was developed, at least written down. They probably knew about it before that, but it was developed in 1815. It's never been contradicted, and it's not going to be contradicted because it's high school algebra. It's not anything all that complicated, but it's a very important idea that we built the whole world around. And I want to take just a few minutes to explain it, and I'll try to do a better job than they do in economics classes. Basically, let's start out. Let's say like you do when you're a professor. I'm going to be a professor again for 4 or 5 minutes here. There's only two goods in the world, only two people in the world, okay? You and me, okay? What's your name?
Rosa.
I'm sorry?
Rosa.
Earlzak. Oh, that's a beautiful name, okay? So it's just the two of us, and there's only two goods, bread and butter, okay? Or something, okay? So we start out, and there's only two people. She makes her bread and butter. I make my bread and butter. And then we kind of start paying attention to each other, and we realize she makes really good bread, okay? Her bread's a lot better than my bread. And my butter's a little better than hers. I should have picked something besides butter. Better butter is going to trip me up at some point. But we'll stick with it, okay? So she makes really good bread. I make really good butter. It would make sense for her to make all the bread and me to make all the butter, and then we trade. And we're both better off, okay? That's easy. That's the easy one. That's called absolute advantage. Comparative advantage is just a little more complicated, okay? Again, there's just the two of us. There's just bread and butter. She makes that great bread better than I do. But she also makes butter better than I do, which would probably be the case. In reality, if we were sitting down, I'm sure she'd make better bread and better butter than I would. When my wife describes me to people, she says, Ray doesn't do things. And so that's kind of where I am in life. But she is knocking the top out on the bread. The bread is great. My butter is okay. Hers is a little better. But, I mean, she kills it on bread, and she's better than me on butter, but she's more better. If you want to go to South Louisiana for a minute, she's mo better, okay? It's easy to understand this better. I've always told people, my friends who are professors, you ought to teach this like they teach it in South Louisiana, okay? She does bread mo better, and she does butter less best, okay? That's the opposite of mo better in Cajun, okay? So she still does better with both of them, but she has a comparative advantage in bread. The basic notion is, if she makes all the bread and I make all the butter and we trade, we're still both better off. That's comparative advantage. And our whole world is built around it. We don't realize it at all. Simple example, if you just look around this room for a minute and just glance around, look at the chairs, the furniture, the lights, the sound system, your clothes, water bottles, whatever's in here, your phones, whatever. Just kind of glance around the room. There is something in this room that was made in more than 150 countries. And that's kind of cheating because this is a big, nice room. Same thing in your living room. It'll be at least 100, probably 125 in your living room at home. It's made somewhere else. Nobody passed a law and said, you got to go out and get something from 125 countries to have a room. Nobody monitored it and counted it and checked them off as we did it. It just happens naturally because all these countries kind of do their thing, and then we all trade. And we're all better off when that happens. And so when you start messing with that, that's when you start getting some economic harms associated with it. And we're messing with it right now. It's not as bad as we thought it would be. They were talking at 25% tariffs. We're averaging about 16 or 17 right now. I think you'll see that come down a little more gradually over the course of the year. But prior to this, for the 15 years prior to this, it was about 2%. We had pretty close to open markets. But so it's gone up quite a bit. Now, why in the world would you care about that? Well, obviously, it means you pay more for stuff at the store. That's one of the reasons we can't seem to get inflation down anymore. But also think about some of the things we're putting tariffs on. Lumber, steel, glass, aluminum. What does D.R. Horton make houses out of? Lumber, glass, steel, aluminum. And so you start raising the cost significantly. It has a disproportionate effect on this industry, on your industry, than it does on some others, because it just so happens the tariffs are falling heavily on construction materials. Okay, and so that's one reason why it's so relevant to you. The other thing is, obviously, it affects the financial markets and how they feel about things, and you obviously have a big stake in that. And I will tell you, I've been doing this for about 50 years. I know and during that 50 years, I know that's hard to believe given how young and real and athletic I look. I know that's hard to believe. Okay. Why were you snickering? Let me explain something to y'all, okay? Maybe you don't go to a lot of speeches, okay? There's jokes at the beginning, okay? The stuff in the middle is serious, okay? So, yeah. No, anyway. No, I've been doing it for about 50 years. I've been scared twice. 2 days I've been scared in those 50 years. One of them I won't go into because it happened a while back, but you will remember, many of you will remember if you were in business at the time, 2008, when there was one day in all that mess in 2008 with the mortgages where the Fed literally had to put $1 trillion of liquidity into the financial system that day or the global economy would have collapsed. I was scared that day, okay? The other day was April the 9th of last year. And here's what happened on April the 9th, okay? First of all, April the 2nd, you may remember, was Liberation Day, when they announced all these tariffs, okay, on all these countries. And when they did that, the stock market went down, as you would expect, and the bond market went up. And that's kind of how it usually works if you pay attention to this stuff. Normally when the stock market has a good day, the bond market has a bad day and vice versa. And there's reasons for that. If you are feeling really good about stuff on a day, if you wake up, man, it's great and it's wonderful and everything's going to be great in the future, you want to own a piece of that. So you go buy stocks, okay? If you're nervous about the future and you kind of want to hedge your bets a little bit, you go buy bonds where you can just get that, just keep getting that interest. And so typically and big institutions, as you know, move this money around trillions of dollars every day. So they tend to move it one way or the other. So you tend to have a good day in one, bad day in the other. That's kind of how it's supposed to work. In fact, the day after the election, if you remember, the stock market had a really good day. The bond market had a bad day. And there are logical reasons for it. You know, whatever your politics, you wake up the next morning and President Trump's been reelected, or elected again. I guess it's not reelected technically, but anyway, he's president again, going to be president. And you think, well, I bet my taxes will go down. I like that. I bet there'll be some regulation that gets streamlined and simplified. I like that too. I think I'll buy some stocks. And then other folks are thinking, yeah, but you know, he's talking about these tariffs and all that stuff, and that's going to kind of probably cause interest rates to go up and stop my bond prices to go down, so I don't like that so much. So the stock market has a good day, the bond market has a bad day. That's kind of what you expect. April the 9th, April 2nd, stock market has a bad day, bond market has an okay day. Next day, same thing. Then you get to next day, same thing. Get to the weekend. We get to April the 9th. And that morning, sure enough, stock market starts having a bad day, just like it's supposed to that during this time. But people do not go buy bonds. Now, that may seem like a small thing, but it's not. What that says is people have decided if we're concerned and we want to hedge our bets and we're kind of worried about things, we don't think U.S. government bonds is what we need to buy right now. Our bonds are the linchpin of the entire global economy. We are the world's definition of a risk-free asset. I mean, you guys deal with interest rates a lot. If you go out anytime, if you're trying to calculate the rate for any investment anywhere in the world, and you do it the old-fashioned way where you start with a risk-free rate, then you add risk to it, the risk-free rate you're going to start with is a U.S. government bond of that, whatever, 5 years, 10 years, whatever you're talking about. It is the world's definition of a politically risk-free asset. The day that people will not buy U.S. debt is not a day any of us want to be around. Okay, and so that started happening. And then, everybody in Washington realized that they quickly put together a 90-day moratorium on tariffs, and it all recovered, and we got through it. But that was the first really significant chink in that armor that we've seen. And so, this stuff has real consequences, and that's why I want to talk about it, but in particular, it disproportionately hits the construction sector, which is the raw material for what you guys do. Now let's talk about the other one's not controversial at all. Let's talk about immigration for a few minutes, okay? That one's not the least bit controversial, okay? And it's a tough issue, it really is. And we all know there are genuine, legitimate border security issues and things of that nature. But I want to take a little bit broader, a little bit different perspective on it. I was born, and I see a few of you in the room that probably join me, most of you don't, but I was born in that period between 1946 and 1964 that most people call the baby boom, okay? Basically, after we won World War II, we came home, we felt good about things, so we started having lots of kids, and we kept having lots of kids until 1964 when birth control pills came on the market, okay? And so that period in between, we just had tons of kids. And we were kind of a wrecking ball through the whole economy. We overcrowded the schools when we were young. We overcrowded the workforce when we were older. Now we're messing with the retirement system. I mean, we've just kind of been this wrecking ball that's worked our way through the economy for years and years and years. But what happens then is when you have something like that, every 20, 25 years after that, you kind of have these rolling kind of echo booms. But they're all a little bit smaller than the one before because we've been having fewer kids, okay? Well, we were kind of in the middle of one of those back in 2007. And I won't ask you to remember most of the numbers I'm going to talk about today, but remember this one for at least 2 or 3 minutes till I get to the next one, okay? In 2007, there were about 4.6 million babies born in this country. And we were kind of on an upward swing, and that was pretty good, okay? 2007. It went down a little bit in 2008. And that's not surprising because the one group I don't have to tell what happened in 2008 is realtors. You all know what happened in 2008. But when you have a recession, people don't have as many kids because they get nervous and that type of thing. And that's expected. But it went down in 2009, in 2010, in 2011. It just kept going down. And it went down every year from then until now, except 2021. It went up a little bit in 2021 because we were all cooped up in 2020 and didn't have anything else to do. So we ended up having a few more babies, but then it started going right back down again. That's true. You can look it up. I'm telling you the truth. Last year, there were less than 3.3 million babies born in the country. So we went from 4.6 to less than 3.3. That's a big drop in the number of kids. Now, why I bring that up is 2007, this is 2026, those folks are going to be 19 this year. Okay? They're starting to enter the workforce. Okay? So what that tells us is every year, year after year after year, for a long time now, we're going to have fewer new people coming into the workforce every year, young people, just because there's not as many of them to come in. Okay? Then, on the other end of the spectrum, the youngest of those baby boomers are in their early 60s right now. So they are retiring in pretty large numbers right now. So you've got this situation where you have fewer people coming in and you have more people going out, okay? And we already have a workforce shortage. Everywhere I go, people are looking for good workers. I mean, there's a workforce shortage already. and that kind of would make it worse. How have we always managed to plug that gap? Since we started as a country, have we always plugged that gap? Okay, by bringing people in. Okay, we've always done that. We've never quite kept up, except when we baby boomers were going crazy as we entered the workforce. Other than that, we've never kept up. So basically, immigration's been a vital part of our country forever, and we've relied on those workers forever. And now here's the frightening statistic. Okay, and there's a little bit of lag in these numbers because of the shutdown, but this is pretty close. Here's the frightening statistic. If you take January of last year to January of this year, 1 year, there's about 1.5 million fewer foreign-born people working in this country today than there were then. So we're not plugging the gap, we're making it worse. Okay, and so that starts to create problems. And again, it really affects the industry you're in for a few reasons. The obvious one is there's not as many people to buy houses, but beyond that, let's think about that a minute. The ones that get the most attention, and I'll tell you, there's not the whole story, but obviously the people that get the most attention are the undocumented workers. Okay? They're the ones that get the most attention, and that's understandable, why they would. But the simple truth is, in the state of Texas today, roughly 14 million people will go to work. Roughly 1.2 million of them will be undocumented immigrants. That's about 9%. Okay? If we suddenly didn't have 9% of our workforce, we'd be in a world of hurt. Okay? But it's even worse than that because they're not all spread out evenly across industries. Half of our agricultural workforce would be gone if we didn't have these folks. And here's the one that matters to you. About 40% of our construction workforce would be gone. Okay? There's already projects in this area right now that are on hold because they cannot get enough people to work. Okay? And the way we've gone about the process is also, and obviously it's gotten a lot of attention lately for all the stuff going on in Minnesota and elsewhere, but part of what happens with the process is even folks who are here legally that have a visa and whatever, they're afraid to come to work. And so it makes it even, you start losing 40%, and then others you lose through that type of attrition, and all of a sudden you don't have enough people out there for that. It's also about 30% or so of our hospitality workforce. So basically, if you want to grow anything, build anything, or go anywhere, we have really built an economy that relies on these workers. And the reason that happened was fairly simple. Markets solve problems. That's what markets do. If there's a need for something, there's a way to make money, somebody's going to figure it out. The market looks around 40 years ago and says, hey, man, we need workers. Hey, there's some over here, let's go get them. And that's what markets do. We have forced this market to be inefficient by making it illegal for the folks who cross, which sometimes mean they cross in inhumane conditions as well. There's a whole lot of issues that go with that. But it also puts risk on employers who literally have nobody else to hire. And we need a system that allows people to come to work, come across the border, humanely work, and then allows employers to hire them, in a reasonable way. And we desperately need that. We've needed it for 50 years. It's a tough issue politically, but there are people at least talking about it now, if nothing else. But anyway, so that's part of the issue of why immigration matters so much in your case is because, again, it's going to affect construction. Tariffs affect construction in a big way. Our immigration situation affects construction in a big way right now. And so that works its way through to what you do. But it also works, I mentioned the folks who buy houses too, it works its way through in another way. We talk about the undocumented folks, as I said, and you can understand that. But the bottom line is we're not making enough people. Doesn't matter what they do, we're not making enough people. This is one of the best premier health complexes in the country is right here in this city. You have an awesome health system here. Walk in one of those hospitals, civilian or military, doesn't matter. Walk through one of those hospitals and just walk up and down the halls and look around. And what you're going to find is 25% of the doctors and 25% of the really skilled healthcare professionals in that hospital, on average, are going to be immigrants. Because we don't have enough of those folks either. Go into one of those fancy biotech research facilities that's here in San Antonio, or the electronic tech facilities up in Austin. Walk in one of those. Depending on what they do, somewhere between 49 and 54% of the PhD engineers that will be in that place on average are going to be immigrants. So it's not just the lower skilled workers, it's across the board because we're just not making enough people. And so again, we need good immigration policy, but policy that recognizes that we need workers too. And the demographics are telling us we're going to need workers for a long time. And obviously that affects you guys in another way because the doctors and the engineers are folks who can buy some nice houses. And so that affects you in another way as well if we end up not being able to access those folks as well as we want to, not to mention the fact that the impact on the healthcare system for deteriorate quality of life and all kinds of things if we really begin to lose a lot of those folks. It's a very important issue and one that's kind of messing with us right now. Another one I want to talk about for a few minutes is, and this one affects your industry as well. It's not quite as controversial, but it's getting a little attention lately, and that's the independence of the Federal Reserve. Okay, and the Federal Reserve being kind of, trying to be above politics as much as they can. And I have to give you a little confession here. When I was just a little bitty baby economist, working on my dissertation down at Rice, in the mid '70s. My dissertation was a big model of the monetary system, which was kind of new at the time. And it's the model that the Federal Reserve still uses to monitor monetary policy. So I got involved with the Fed very early. I still am off and on. In fact, I got a conference call with them this afternoon. But beyond that, this is the part that, and I don't want any comments about my social life. I want no comments whatsoever about my social life. But part of what I had to do when I was doing that and kind of figuring out if I could measure monetary policy was go back and see if I'd measured it in the past correctly. So I had to go back in the 70s and read the minutes of all the Federal Reserve meetings since the 50s, okay? And then since that time, because of what I do, I've continued to. So I have read the minutes of every Federal Reserve meeting since the early 1950s. Again, I want no comments about my social life, okay? But all that to say, you've seen a lot happen there. And the independence is very important. It was set up to be independent. It was set up that way. The folks who make policy, there's 12 people on a thing called the Federal Open Market Committee. 7 of them are the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System. Those are appointed by the president. They are appointed for 14-year terms. There's a reason they're appointed for 14-year terms, because that way one president doesn't get to appoint the whole board. In fact, if you're there 8 years and the math works just right, you get to appoint 4 unless somebody leaves or something. So you usually have different perspectives from that vantage point. The other 5 are presidents of the regional Federal Reserve banks, and they rotate through. Okay, and the president of the New York Fed's always on there because they run the trading desk. And then the other 12 regions, there's 4 more people. Those every couple of years they rotate those folks through. So the bottom line is there should always, even if a president gets to appoint 4 members, there still should be 8 members they didn't appoint. And so consequently, you've got this chance to have balance and independence in there. And that's not to say politics never gets involved, but it's important that it not in general, because a good example, I mentioned that thing back in 2008 when the Federal Reserve had to put $1 trillion in a couple of days to stabilize the financial system. You think they could have done that if Congress had to approve it? You think you could have gotten votes to, okay, we're going to dump $1 trillion right now? And if they hadn't have done it, the financial system would have collapsed. Okay? I'll give you another one, and it's controversial too. But the Federal Reserve put $4 trillion of liquidity into the economy during COVID. Now that's a big reason why we got 9% inflation, and we got 8% mortgage rates and all that. A lot of that was because they did that, okay? You might think, well, that's terrible. You're right. It was absolutely terrible. If they hadn't done it, you would have had they've estimated a couple of million people that would have starved to death, okay? On top of everything else that happened with COVID. So they literally were faced with a terrible choice and a catastrophic choice. There wasn't a good one over here they missed. They had terrible and catastrophic. The political world would have, if you told them you're going to have 9% inflation, 2 presidents are in trouble over that inflation still. You would have never gotten that approved through a political process. The Fed had the luxury of making the terrible choice. That's because of independence. Okay? Right now, as we all know, the president is talking about he really wants interest rates down. He's a little more vocal and boisterous than some, but I can tell you I've done something in every administration since Ford. I've been involved in every administration since Ford. I have never met a president that didn't wish interest rates would go down just before the election. I mean, they all want interest rates to go down just before the election. And you know, they all use kind of some type of persuasion to try to make it happen. And it's important that we call balls and strikes. You know, that the Federal Reserve gets in there, and sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. And it's important that we have independent people. They're not going to get it right 100% of the time, but you at least want that independent, informed judgment on how to do this stuff. And the fact that that's being threatened, you've seen the financial markets react to that just in the past few weeks here. And you know, there were speeches yesterday when the Fed kept interest rates the same this time around. And because, I mean, again, in your business, you'd love for interest rates to be very, very low all the time. You think, but in reality, that would cause some other problems that you wouldn't like. Namely, a lot of inflation and that type of thing would be occurring that would make it more difficult for people to buy houses. So you know, it sounds good, low interest rates sounds good on the surface. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. And you need somebody that can take a step back and look at everything and make those judgments. And so that's very important. Now, when you combine those three things, what's going on with tariffs, what's going on with immigration, what's going on with the Fed, and a few other things, you end up with probably the single worst word in the economy. And by the way, this does end on a happy note, I promise, okay, where I'm going with all this, okay? But the single worst word in the economy is uncertainty, okay? That is the single worst word in the economy is uncertainty. And I don't know if you know this or not, but we have a Nobel Prize in economics. And we're kind of proud of that. You know, because, I mean, they have them in chemistry and, you know, medicine and all that. You'd expect that. But they don't have one in sociology. They don't have one in psychology, you know, all that stuff. So, and we got one. Ours came along a few years after the others. But we got one because we managed to muck our stuff up with math more than the others, I guess. But anyway, we're kind of proud of the fact we're the only social science with the Nobel Prize. Well, a few years ago, they gave it to a couple of psychologists. Our prize went to a couple of psychologists. So we were upset, okay? Not really true. One of them is a very dear friend of mine who recently died. They're brilliant guys who transformed the way we think about the economy and helped us understand how important human reactions are. For example, if you took that one economics class sometime, somewhere in the first couple of chapters, they told you, we kind of assume that consumers and investors are rational. These guys have done a lot of studies and said, no, we're not always that rational. We sometimes systematically do stupid things, you know. That's one aspect of it. But the other one that they taught us was, and it's kind of common sense if you think about it, the most common reaction to uncertainty is to do nothing. I mean, that's the most common reaction to uncertainty is to do nothing. And that means, you know, and it doesn't matter. I mean, we talk about it in the economy from my perspective, but if it's uncertain in your family, uncertain in your health, whatever it is, you know, it makes you take a step back and be a little uneasy about doing any big things. And that means you don't open that new location. You don't open that new plant. You don't hire those additional people. You don't make that big investment. You don't bring out a new product. You don't buy a car. You don't buy a house, okay? Because uncertainty causes us to slow down and think about those things. And right now we have a lot of that in the economy, and that's been one of the things that's happened. And as a result of all this thing, and I'll tell you another place where uncertainty works in you guys' favor. One of the other things the psychologists taught us was, or where the psychologists help us, this was not, we interrupt the speech for a different story because I think you guys find this interesting, okay? One of the things they also told us was people really, really, really react to the most recent information they've seen, okay? And a simple example of that is, at some point, you're all old enough. I mean, I know some of you weren't born when I was writing that monetary policy stuff, and frankly, I find that disgusting. And most of you aren't as old as I am, but all of you have been around long enough to have been happy about $3 gas and mad about $3 gas. Okay? It was $3 gas both times, but you saw it go from 2 to 3, you were mad. You saw it go from 4 to 3, you were happy. It's done both in the last 7 or 8 years. Okay? So, you know, and it's because it's what we've seen most recently that we react to. Where that's helping you guys right now is, you know, back a few years ago, we had those 3% mortgages right and left, okay? Then we had those 8 or 9% mortgages, okay? Now we're starting to see that come down some. I mean, D.R. Horton announced a cool program they have, but in general, the mortgage rate's getting close to 6 now. People remember the 9 more than they remember the 3, okay? In other words, people are not saying, well, I got to wait for it to get to 3% to buy a house. They're saying, well, it was 8.5 now it's 6. I think it's looking pretty good now, okay? And so that's a way that the way we react psychologically is going to help you guys through this cycle, because people aren't going to wait for rates to be at 3 or 3.5% to pull the trigger to buy a house. And you're already beginning to see that happen in this market and others. So anyway, all that to say, the result of all that is the economy has slowed down. And there's no question the economy slowed down. I mean, we finally got the numbers in. Last year, the United States economy averaged about 49,000 jobs a month. The year before it was 160,000. And people were griping about that. President Biden lost an election when the economy was gaining $160,000 of jobs a month. Now it's gaining 49,000 jobs a month on average. Okay? And historically, it's been into 200, 215, 220, something like that. It's kind of been the long-term average for a while. Right here in Texas, because a lot of times when bad things happen in the national economy, in Texas, we'll just say, well, you guys go ahead and do whatever you're going to do. We'll just sit this one out, and we're just going to keep growing, okay? Just don't mind us. We're fine. We'll just keep growing. And we've been able to do that in some circumstances, but we haven't been able to do it this time around. Because which state of all the states do you think is most affected by tariffs? Texas. Because we have the biggest exports, imports. We're the big international state. 1 out of every $6 comes through there. You, because of your proximity to Mexico, because of the nature of the manufacturing companies that are here and their global supply chains and all that, you are very heavily affected here in San Antonio by tariffs. Which state do you think is the most affected by immigration? Texas. We rely on those workers more than anybody else for 2 reasons. Number 1, we've grown a lot more in the last 20 years than everybody else, so we need more workers. Number 2, we share this enormous long border with Mexico. And we've really integrated those folks into our economy in a pretty significant way. So we haven't gotten to sit this one out either. Texas has been averaging 250,000 jobs a year, something like that. And we started out this year, we're rocking along doing what we're supposed to do. In January, we gained 25,000 jobs. In February, we gained 30,000. In March, we gained 25. In April, we gained 30. In May, we gained 20. That's okay. So we're rocking along the usual way. From May until December, total net gain is 10,000 jobs. Okay? So we normally do 20, 25,000, 30,000 a month. In the last 8 months, we've done 10,000 total. And it was negative until we had a pretty good December. It was negative. Over the course of the entire year this year, Texas has gained around 130,000 jobs, which is, again, most of it was in the first few months, way, way, way below that normal, well over 200,000, close to 250 that we gained. Okay? Similarly, San Antonio, similar situation. I will tell you, I'll give you one statistic. You'll probably like this one. It's not great, but it's good. I told you from May until now, Texas had a net gain of 10,000 jobs. From May until now, San Antonio has had a net gain of 7,500 jobs. So the whole state of Texas has had 10,000. San Antonio's had 7,500, which means all the rest of the state combined only managed to net, some up, some down, but only net gained 2,500 jobs. And San Antonio gained 3 times that amount. So, that's kind of bad, good news in a bad news situation. But nonetheless, there's been a big slowdown. San Antonio normally gains 25,000 jobs a year. This year's going to be about 14. Okay? And you feel that in your industry as well. Now, forecast. Where do we see this? Where do we see all this going? Honestly, I don't think we get out of it tomorrow. I do think we start to see a whole lot of progress by the middle of the year for a number of reasons, not the least of which is midterms are approaching, and people kind of start saying, well, we got to stop some of this mess and kind of let things ride a little bit, and let the economy do what it can do. Some of it, and then there's some structural things as well where some of this stuff will kind of run its course. But anyway, so I think it's going to be kind of sluggish. Our forecast, and it's in this report here thing if you want to look at it later, but our forecast shows San Antonio gaining about 100,000 jobs over the next 5 years, which is that 20,000 a year you normally gain, but backloaded a little bit, a little bit less this year and then making up for it in future years. Although positive gains this year, as you had positive gains last year. The state of Texas, same thing. I mean, everybody we're forecasting, the overall number for a 5-year average is not that different, but it's all kind of backloaded. It's not in the immediate next year, year and a half or so. But nonetheless, I think you will see some expansion happening with all that. Longer term, I think things are looking good. I mean, basically, Texas has performed very well for a long time. I mean, there's all kinds of statistics to indicate that. 1 out of every 6 jobs that have been created in the country since the pandemic ended have been in Texas. I mean, we've knocked the top out of that. Another way to look at it, Texas had a net gain of about 60,000 manufacturing jobs. That doesn't sound like much, but the country's lost manufacturing jobs in a big way over that same time period. So, I mean, we're really going against the trend there. Every year there's a magazine called Site Selection Magazine that gives out this thing called the Governor's Cup, which is for the state that gets the most new locations, expansions, and significant investments over a certain size. They give that award every year. Texas has won it the last 13 years in a row. Okay, the last 4 years, we have had over twice as many as the second place state. So we've lapped the field. I mean, literally, we've had over twice as many new locations in Texas as any other state. And so, I mean, we've got a remarkable success story here, but we're feeling this crunch right now. We're seeing the job reductions. We're seeing the job growth reductions, at least. We're seeing the same things that you're seeing in other places and not performing quite as well as we'd like to. But if you look out into the future, what you start to see is the reason we can build confidence about this, we look at what's growing. And we look at where we're positioned in what's growing, okay? And Texas in general, San Antonio in particular, are very well positioned in what's growing, okay? Probably the fastest growing industry in the world right now is health and bioscience. Last time I checked, y'all had a little bit of that here in San Antonio, you know. And historically, the state of Texas has lagged other states historically on that, but in the last 10 years, we started catching up in a big way. Our growth rate's been about 5 times the national, about 3 times the national average over the last 10 years in terms of growth in this industry. We were selected as one of the sites for the big federal research, DARPA for Health, ARPA-H they call it. We were selected as one of the big sites for that. And there's several multi-billion-dollar investments in health and life sciences going on here right now. There are a couple of things driving this huge demand that's making this the fastest growing thing in the world right now. One of them is COVID was a wake-up call. I mean, it made us realize we need to make certain things here, certain things need to happen here. We kind of are not where we need to be in some areas. And then the other piece of it is that same old thing I was talking about earlier with immigration, those pesky demographics, okay? As a country, we are getting older, okay? And although some drugs have helped this recently for some folks, as a country, we are getting more obese, okay? Those two things really drive healthcare demand, okay? And so, and some other lifestyle elements, that sort of thing, are also driving pieces of it. And we're particularly vulnerable here in Texas to diabetes because of our demographics, things like that are happening. And Texas is making significant investments. I think some of you probably know we've had this cancer research program in Texas, CPRIT, for a number of years that has made huge differences in cancer success rates and that type of thing. We voters just voted to create another one just like it for dementia. And that is a rising growth area, and the state of Texas will be investing significantly in that. There's a lot of big investments taking place. Again, you have been, because of the military hospitals, because of the civilian hospitals, because of groups that have been around a long time like Southwest Research, and then some of the other new ones that have been developed, you have been a leader in this. You have been kind of a Texas leader in this sphere for a long time. And obviously that's going to pay handsome dividends going forward. Another area that's growing a lot is advanced manufacturing. All these sophisticated manufacturing stuff. You guys are loaded up with that. And I mean, and Toyota's expanding right now here. Boeing's expanding right now here. I mean, you're loaded up with those kinds of plants. That was not part of your history. When I first started forecasting Texas back in the early 80s, San Antonio was viewed as a place that didn't have manufacturing. You had tourism, you had medical, you had financial services, primarily because of USAA. That was kind of that was the book on San Antonio. What people didn't realize was that military thing out there called Brooks Air Force Base was really a huge machine shop. I mean, you really had tons of manufacturing. It was just government it was counted as government data instead of manufacturing data. Once that became Port San Antonio and got opened up and you saw these major companies start investing out there. All of a sudden, all that infrastructure turns into advanced manufacturing. And that's served your area very well. The whole AI data center thing. I mean, Texas is by far the fastest growing state in that. We're behind up around D.C. and a couple of others right now overall, but by probably 2027, 2028 at the latest, we'll be the top state for data centers. You got a ton of them down here, particularly on the west side of San Antonio. There's a lot of those down here. There's some challenges with all this, and I'll mention those in a few minutes. But basically, that's another that's seeing growth. Financial services. It's getting a lot of publicity right now because we have a Texas stock exchange in Dallas now. We have the New York Stock Exchange in Dallas. We have NASDAQ in Dallas. And that's getting a lot of attention. But you also have the one financial institution, made of the top 10 financial institutions in the 80s in Texas, only one survived that whole crunch. That was Frost. Okay? They continue to make huge investments. Obviously, the new facilities here. You've got an anchor in Frost. You've got an anchor in USAA in financial services. I mean, you have, again, a long history of great success in that you're building on. And right now, I mean, people focus on that building full of computers or that couple of floors of a building of computers that's now the Texas Stock Exchange. But the reality is, if you look at overall financial sector situation, including banking and insurance, the whole 9 yards, Texas now has more people working in that sector than New York. People don't realize that. In the last 20 years, New York has continued to be the major center, and they will be. They've grown 16%. Texas has grown 110%. Okay, so it didn't. At that level, you start passing stuff pretty soon, and we're expanding that into the investment banking side, which is very good for Texas because we need the capital. We have since the days there's never been a year since the Republic of Texas started that we have not been a net importer of capital. We've never had enough homegrown capital, and now we're starting to reverse that trend more than we have in quite some time. So all that's good, and all that bodes well for growth going forward. And then the energy sector, broadly defined, okay? I'm not talking about just oil and gas, although that is actually going to grow. I'm not talking about just renewables, although that is likely going to grow. I think nuclear, you're going to see some nuclear, you're going to see some other things, because the bottom line is we're just going to need a ton of energy going forward. And we also need to solve climate problems, okay? But there's some amazing technologies out there right now that are allowing that to happen. And there's also a weird thing, because you guys kind of became the headquarters, I guess you could call it, for the Eagle Ford Shale. When that drilling started, this area became where the kind of business part of it took place. And that shale has a very similar, it doesn't get as much publicity as the Permian Basin because the Permian Basin is 15 times as big, but it's a significant formation. It has about the same chemical composition as the Permian Basin. And why that matters, this sounds weird. Not all oil is created equal. And when it's coming out of the ground, it has a variation in the amount of carbon and sulfur and that sort of thing in it. It's not all the same. And some of the cleanest oil in the world is Texas oil. We can't claim credit for it. It happened 230 million years ago when some plates shifted around, okay? And I mean, much as we like to brag on stuff, we went 230 million years without a single post on social media about this. I mean, nobody was paying attention, okay? But the end result is, the oil we get from Canada that comes out of the tight sands, 70% more carbon coming out of the ground than Texas oil. The Mayan crude we get from Mexico, 70% more carbon coming out of the ground. Okay? Saudi Arabia's is pretty close to ours. They have relatively clean oil as that goes. But most of the Middle East, Iran, Iraq, Qatar, all that area, is about 57% more. Now, what that means is you guys deal in markets all the time. Think about a market. We're going to have to, every scenario, including the ones put out by the most liberal folks in the world, much as they hate to admit it, show we are going to need more oil and gas in the future, even as renewables expand dramatically, nuclear comes back, black swans, hydrogen, nitrogen, ammonia, all that stuff. We're simply going to need a lot more power. For the emerging countries, because they're growing, they're starting to manufacture, they're pulling 3 billion people out of abject poverty into lifestyles where they can actually have things that use energy. And the advanced economies, because of all the energy, this AI and chips and crypto mining and data centers and all that is eating. I mean, all of a sudden, everybody needs a lot of energy. We're going to need it all. Okay, think about a market. You got to do two things. You're going to have to produce oil and gas, and you're going to have to do it with less carbon. Wouldn't the market say, well, let's start with the oil that has the least carbon to begin with? because then we have less we have to capture and do something with. And so it's literally going to shift demand away from other parts of the world toward the oil that's here. Okay? And so that's part of what we'll see happening going forward. And there's also some amazing technologies happening right now that I think are going to change the world in some ways. One of them is that we're working with a company right now. As you probably know, air combines with fuel. I mean, air combines with petroleum to make fuel, okay? And the emissions are the part that doesn't get translated into energy. It's the part that's left over, okay? Well, this new group that does controls has come up with a deal where they can adjust the mixture of air and energy 30,000 times a second and optimize it. And they already have some prototypes in power plants where they are getting zero emissions from fossil fuels. Now, we're decades away from that being commercially available and all that, but I'm saying those are the kinds of things that are on the horizon that are going to change the outlook. So, you know, we're big in energy. You have every type of energy. You have some type of representation in here. And so, again, all that looks very good. You know, what does all that say about real estate in San Antonio right now? Well, you know, it's been, as was said earlier, January starting off pretty well here. It's looking like a little bit better year. Last year was kind of tough. The average housing price went up just a little bit. The median price went down just a little bit. That tells you sold a few more expensive homes and kind of brought the average up. But you're not selling the really expensive homes. I mean, there's a huge inventory of those right now relative to the number of buyers that are out there. Basically, most of the sales are taking place in that kind of $200,000 to $500,000 range is where they're happening. More listings, longer time on the market, you know, that type of thing is going on right now. I think you'll start seeing that work itself down a little bit as we go forward here. I think you are going to see it get better. One thing that's really hampered things, I mean, obviously interest rates have been high, but the other one people never talk about, that whole PITI thing, is insurance. Okay? Insurance premiums have really gone through the roof. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is we've had a lot of natural disasters that are expensive, you know, and raise the cost. And number two, those darn tariffs and that darn immigration has raised construction costs. So when they do have to repair something or replace something, it costs more to do it. And so they have to raise their rates in order to actuarially be able to write those policies. And so that, you know, that's what you find all that stuff kind of working together, and that's not. I mean, I'm not saying they're going to stabilize. I'm saying they're not going to grow up 30 or 40% a year like they have been. You know, so that I think that's going to level off that a little bit, and we'll use that psychological thing. People remember the most recent ones, not the old ones, and that will help us. And then I think you'll see gradual reduction in interest rates. On the mortgage side. We've seen pretty good ones now. I think you'll continue to see some of that. The Federal Reserve still, although they didn't raise interest rates yesterday, they're still biased toward lowering rates right now. I think to the extent, if it keep inflation somewhat under control, you'll see rates probably come down a couple more times this year. And the mortgage rate doesn't always follow the Fed rate. People get confused about that. I mean, the Fed rate is an overnight rate. I mean, what they can actually control is an overnight rate of interest. And so, and overnight in 30 years is a big difference, you know, in overnight in 30 years. So sometimes, like last year when the Fed lowered rates, mortgage rates went up. But there's more as we get past some of this uncertainty, then people feel better about committing funds, and you start seeing rates come down. And I think that, you know, and that encourages people to buy. So I think, you know, I think you're going to see this year be a better year than last year in kind of setting the stage for some better things to come. It's been a kind of sluggish year. A lot of things are moving in the right direction. Last thing I want to talk about before I take a few questions is the challenges, because they're always there, and I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about them. Water. We need water. Okay. Any way you go about it, we need water. Power, roads, educated kids, and educated adults. All of those are big challenges for the state of Texas and for this region right now. In terms of water, we all just voted at the last election to put $1 billion a year into a water fund for the next 20 years for the state of Texas. $20 billion water fund. Anybody know what the estimated cost to get adequate water supplies in Texas is today? $152 billion. Okay? So 20 is not going to get us there. Okay? But you shouldn't expect the government to pay for all that. I mean, that can add some incentives to help bring the private sector into investing, and there's a lot happening there now. Some desal technologies are improving, not only in taking water out of the Gulf, or the ocean somewhere, taking salt out of that, but even some of the brackish groundwater, taking salt out of that. Something's happening in the energy sector is these little micro-nuclear plants. Build a nuclear plant on 2 or 3 acres. It can run a big factory, it can run an oil field, it can run a big, huge AI operation or whatever, and you can perpetually recycle the water with the heat from the nuclear plant and just reuse it over and over and over again. There's also been I do a lot of work with the Coca-Cola Foundation on water. It's kind of interesting. Coca-Cola, probably won't shock you if you stop and think about it, is the largest user of water in the world. Okay, that makes sense. In the last 5 years, every year they've put back more than they've used. And for the last 2 or 3 years, Pepsi's done the same thing. I mean, there's a real focus on reclaimed water. But in some of that work, one of the things we've discovered is this surprises a lot of people. Agriculture, in fact, I'll just ask, if you had to guess what percentage of the GDP is agriculture, what would you guess? Anybody? 20%. 20? Anybody else? I heard 20, 10. Anybody else? I heard what did I hear? Okay, 1. It's an important 1%, but it's 1%, okay? Anybody want to take a guess of what percentage of the non-reclaimable water agriculture uses? 72. So 1% of the output, 72% of the water. Now, there's reasons. Obviously, there's reasons you have to have water for agriculture, okay? But there's also ways you can really bring that down with newer technologies. If we could reduce that from 72 to 55 or 60, we solve the water problem, okay? And so there's a lot of research going in that area too. So it's going to be one of those things where we will solve the problem, we'll pay more for water in the process. Power, ERCOT hit its all-time record recently, 94 gigawatts in one day, okay? They're projecting in 2030, so we're not talking way out in time. It's 2026 right now. Their baseline projection is about 150. Now think about it. It took us over a century to get to 94. They're saying by 2030 it'll be 150. If you take every single AI facility that has applied, for power and trying to get it, it would be 240. Okay. Now some of those are not financially viable. We'll kind of fly, taking a lark, see what happens. But basically, we're going to need a lot of power. And we're going to need a lot of infrastructure to move the power from where it is to where it's needed. And so, that's going to be a big challenge. Again, one that there is some investment taking place. The legislature's done a few things to help us, a few things to hurt us, unfortunately, in the last session. But they did a few things to help us with that in terms of production. There's a flaw in the system in Texas. When myself and another guy were kind of in charge 20 some odd years ago, figuring out how to make the electric competition thing work. And we told them exactly what to do, and they did everything except one thing. And now that one thing is jumping up to bite us, okay? The one thing they did was they did not create a capacity market, a market that incentivizes you to build capacity whether you need it today or not. If you think about the old time regulations, some of you were around when some of this happened, if you had the old fashioned utilities like you used to have, and they still have over in a little bit of the Panhandle, a little bit of down by on the Gulf, there's still a little bit of this stuff. But you'd say, okay, the utility can say, we want to build a power plant. And it's going to cost this much. They go through all these hearings and things and say, okay, you can build it and you'll get this much return on it. And they set your rates to where they could build the plant and get that much return. And they always built about 125 or 130% of what they needed, which you should, because it's prudent. And then if you have a winter storm Uri, you got something to fall back on, that sort of thing. They approved everything we told them to except the capacity market, which was kind of automatic back then because they always kept 20 or 30% extra. You only make money in Texas with power the minute you sell it. You don't make money for having it around in case you need it. You make money when you sell it. So therefore, there was no incentive to have an extra kilowatt anywhere. And consequently, we got a little bit behind on the infrastructure. But the legislature's done some things recently that will help us catch up, help us deal with that, make the AI developers themselves be more actively involved in making sure we have the power and that sort of thing. But that's going to be a challenge. We always need roads. I mean, even this past year, we had the lowest population growth we've had in a long time this past year in Texas, and we just got the numbers this week, and over 1,000 people a day net increase in population. And that means lots of folks to travel, lots of roads, lots of water, lots of everything. And we have challenges there as well. The single biggest challenge we have is educating our kids, okay? Because there's nothing more important than that, because that is our workforce of the future. Texas has all these natural resources, all these tech companies, all these other stuff going for us, cost of living, regulatory climate, all the stuff that makes us win all these awards and all that stuff. But the currency of economic development is people. And as we go forward, because of all that demographic stuff I've talked about, as we go forward, that's going to become more and more and more important. People say, well, no, AI is going to take care of that. No, it's not. And if y'all want me to go into that, I can go into it if you ask me a question about it. But I don't want. I've probably already talked longer than I should have. But basically, we have a very young population in Texas. The primary reason we have a very young population in Texas is we have a large Hispanic population in Texas. And on average, that is a younger population that has larger families. Okay, and that's wonderful because that's the source of the big economic advantage we have going forward. The Hispanic population is roughly 41% or so of the state of Texas right now, much more down here. But 41% of the state of Texas, it's about 55% of the school enrollment because it's younger, they have larger families, okay? We did some analysis not long ago where we looked at what if you took the household wealth of all the families that have kids in school in Texas and you start carving it up different ways and looking at it. Those 55% of the kids come from households with less than 6% of the money. Now, what that means is some of them have language barriers when they come to school. Some have to work part-time jobs to help support the family. If they need a tutor, a summer enrichment program, a computer, broadband, software, whatever, that's going to be very tough. No matter how much the family wants to help them, there's simply not the resources there. And so we have a real challenge to educate those kids. Recently, the National Center for Education Statistics did a really deep dive they had enough data to do 41 states, and they ranked Texas first in difficult student body to educate because, again, the language issues and things like that. We were 34th out of 41 in resources we commit to it. And, you can't do that forever. CNBC does this huge ranking of all the states every year. The last several years, we've been first or second in workforce and 30th or less in education. You don't get to do that forever. Because those kids grow up. And the other thing that happens is the kids that grow up in Texas stay in Texas. The census tells us more than any other state, 82% of the people who are raised in Texas end up in Texas as adults and for a significant portion of their adult lives. So these kids are either going to be the greatest workforce in history or they're going to be a huge drain on the social service system. And the difference is going to be education. And so literally, I go so far as to says no matter everything else I've talked about today, everything else anybody else could talk about, if we educate these kids, absolutely nothing is going to stop Texas from growing. If we don't educate these kids, absolutely nothing is going to allow Texas to grow. It really does come down to being that simple. And on that happy note, I'll be happy to take a few questions. Thank y'all.
All righty, we've got time for a few questions, so if you've got one, stand up. I'm going to run the mic out to you because we do have about another 100 people online watching, and they want to be able to hear you. So just wait till I bring the mic, and then Dr. Perryman will get you answered. So who's going to kick us off with a question? Don't be shy now. Y'all don't got any questions? I don't believe y'all. All right, Holden, here we go, buddy.
Thank you. That was really I like that. So
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
You're the one, huh?
I got a question. So I'm 25 years old. Just graduated college a couple of years back, and a lot of our educated friends are saying that there are no jobs available when clearly there are, right? Do you think it's a lack of motivation from the younger generation to go out and expand and look at newer jobs, or is that, what's your opinion on that?
Oh, very good question. Very good question. Well, at this moment, as I said, the job market has slowed down. This is a bad year to graduate near the job market. There's no question. That ebbs and flows all the time, but this is not a good time to be entering the job market because we've had this big slowdown in growth. When you normally average 20,000 net jobs a month in the state, and all of a sudden in 8 months you get 10,000 jobs. Okay, I have to hold it up closer. Okay. So anyway, they're right. This time around, I'm not saying all your friends are super energetic and out there doing the right thing, although I'm sure they are. Otherwise, they wouldn't be your friends. But no, this year, and you have that periodically. I have a son-in-law who finished law school at just the wrong time in 2008. You know, I mean, those things happen. And, but then they ebb and flow, and they tend to work themselves out over a couple of years.
Denise?
Yes, ma'am.
My question is a little bit different. It's about real estate and how over the past year or so we've seen kind of the slowdown here in Texas with real estate, and other areas like in the Northeast have been, it's almost like there's been two real estate markets where they have been having not the time on the market and still more of a seller's market there. Do you expect that to continue, and can you share a little bit about why that has been?
Sure. Now, the long term, I expect this area to do better than the Northeast. And you know, a very simple reason for it, and sometimes we make this stuff complicated. I try to make it simple, but when we try to make this stuff complicated, we're going to have a lot more population growth. And you can think of, I've always told people to think of real estate as the boxes that hold the economy. Think about that for a minute. Why do you need more retail space? Because more people are shopping. Why do you need more office space? Because more people work in offices. Why do you need more industrial space? Because more people work in industry. Why do you need more housing units? Okay, because you know, every time you add 2.5 people or so, you got to have a place to put them. And so, and we have this weird dynamic going on right now in that right here in Texas, we don't, if you take the population and how many houses we should have, and you work that out, we don't have enough houses in Texas. Right now, we're like 300,000 short housing units. Yet, we have this situation where houses stay on the market longer, and all that because of the reluctance to buy, the nervousness. You know, I think part of the slowdown in Texas, as I say, is the fact we are more affected by these national phenomena I was talking about. And I think probably because of that, we have a little bit more uncertainty and a little bit more reluctance on the part of people to pull the trigger at this point in time. And again, I think, you know, over time, I think we're going to outperform everybody in the economy. Therefore, we will also outperform everybody in real estate. Because again, if you think, just as you're going around some days, you just kind of think about real estate as the boxes that hold the economy. You see them adding to a factory. At some point, somebody's going to work in that factory, and they're going to need a house. I mean, that's, you know, I mean, if you kind of keep that in mind, I think it kind of helps you frame things. And so I think that's primarily what you're going to see going forward. But we have had a situation, very unusual situation for us, frankly, where we've been disproportionately affected by the things that are kind of slowing down the nation, and that doesn't happen to us very often.
Yeah, Dr. Perryman, thank you so much for everything you've been doing. Clearly, you've done a ton of research, and you've gone back historically for a long time. As an investor, I always like to know more locally, are we in a downside? Are we in a stable market? Are we going growth in real estate? But more importantly, my question would be, have you seen more government overstep now than it has been in the future, or just because of the information age, or just seeing more about it?
Oh, you know, that ebbs and flows all the time, you know, and there's a pendulum that swings back and forth. I've seen it more, I've seen it less than it is right now. In general, the state of Texas has done a pretty good job of lessening oversight where they can over time to still be responsible. I mean, you need some government oversight. I've always told people, and this is a true story, and it'll take me a minute to do this, but I have 5 kids, and they're all grown now, but when they were all young, one morning they were at my house, and they all had friends over. It seemed like 500 or 600 kids were at the house. I mean, I know it wasn't that many, but they were kids everywhere. You've been there. We were fiddling around trying to get breakfast out and everything, and the subject of my athletic ability came up. And my wife pointed out that I took bowling for my PE class at Baylor. And then I said, well, at least I can bowl, and that started a whole conversation. Oh, Daddy, you can't bowl. So all of a sudden, you know, we got two big cars, or Suburban in a car with, you know, 200 people in each one headed to the bowling alley. And we get there, we rent a few lanes, and the little ones, the youngest group was about 3, you know, they would roll the ball, it would go in the gutter, and they would cry. They'd roll the ball, it would go in the gutter, and they would cry. And this was getting out of hand. And the guy finally took pity on us and came and put those little bumpers on the side, you know, and then they could roll the ball, it would bounce off a couple of times, but they'd knock down a pin or two, and they were happy, you know. And so I've always said that's what regulation needs to be. It needs to be those bumpers on the side that give us a wide path to innovate, to create, to do what we want to do, but keep us from running things in the ditch. 2008 is the classic example. I mean, any just modest regulation would not have let that crazy thing happen. You know, I mean, you know, at least make them put their address when they get a mortgage. You know, I mean, but you know, I mean, it was an out of control situation, and Texas does a better job than most states on that. The federal government seems to be trying to do a little bit better on going forward. But again, it ebbs and flows. And, in generally speaking, and this is not universally true, generally speaking, Republican administrations try to have less. Democratic administrations have to have more. That's not universally true, but it's generally, a general pattern that you see. But we need to work toward a more sensible regulation. You guys had a very good session. I mean, there was a lot of things, niggly things in the real estate situation that the Texas legislature made a lot better this time around. So you guys, I don't know if you know it or not, how involved you are, but realtors had a really good session this time around to get rid of some of the worst of the worst. Yeah.
Got one back here, Rob.
Sir, you spoke of the government, you spoke about the things. I was wondering about the foreclosures. Do you have an opinion? I've read a report that says the foreclosures? Yes, sir.
Yeah, again, as the economy improves, that will improve. Right now, unfortunately, and again, we don't find ourselves in this situation very often, but we are right now. The country's averaging about one foreclosure out of every 3,200 mortgages. Texas is adding about one out of every 2,500. So we are, we're like in the top 10 in the country in terms of foreclosure rate now. We're like, I think, 8th or 9th or something. But we're normally not there. I mean, so we're in a situation that we haven't been in a while. And again, I think a lot of it's simply the fact that the forces that have been slowing things down and making things more difficult and causing families to struggle have hit us a little bit harder than they've hit everybody else. Long term, I would not expect that to be the case. Because again, I expect us to outperform the world over time, but for the next year or so, it probably will be because again, we're more impacted by all this stuff that I talked about, tariffs, immigration, all that stuff. We're more impacted by that than other states, and it's starting to translate into things like foreclosures, things like the amount of time houses stay on the market, those kinds of things.
Dr. Perryman, thank you so much. I'm a Gen Xer, so grew up with very little technology, but now am immersed in technology every day. And I have an agent works with me that basically grew up with technology. ChatGPT, I think, is his favorite thing. And right now, I think a lot of agents are worried about AI. It's talking about the advancement of AI and the investments we're making in it. They're worried, is AI taking our jobs? You may or may not have an opinion, but with the focus of it and what we do, some of these agents are a little worried about it. So do you have any opinions or insight for that?
I'll give you some thoughts on that, certainly. Basically, first of all, I'd like that some of you have been in the business a while to think about it, and you're talking about Gen X. I did the first econometric model of Texas with punch cards and a dot matrix printer, okay? So I can relate to how things have changed. But I'm going to ask you to think back a minute, those of you who've been around for a little while, to when the internet first came in. Everybody was saying, we won't need realtors anymore. I mean, we're not going to need any middlemen people of any type, broker of any type, stock market, doesn't matter. We're not going to need any of those people anymore because we can all just communicate on the internet and take care of everything and cut those folks out. How'd that work for them? And I think you're going to see a similar thing with AI. It is going to change it. It's going to change the way you do it. Learn about it, adapt it, use it. It's going to be important. But I will tell you this, a lot of people say it's going to get rid of all these jobs. It will displace some jobs. I mean, there's no question. It's going to displace some jobs. But I will say in the short term, and by that I mean 10 years or less. What you will find is it's a process that's been around for a long time. Economists since the 30s have called it creative destruction, where a new technology comes along and it destroys some things and creates others, but without exception, all the big ones, the creation has been bigger than the destruction, and you end up with more people working. I can think back early in my career, computers were going to get rid of all the jobs. What happened was everybody ended up working with a computer. A few years later, robotics were going to get rid of all the jobs. Well, that didn't happen either. A few years later, it was going to be the internet. It was going to get rid of all the jobs, and today it's AI. And people say, yeah, but AI is a big one. And it is. It's monumental. It is big. It's not what a lot of people think it is. It's fundamentally a scripting algorithm. It's not a brain. Okay, but it can do some amazing things, and it is going to do some things and help us do some things more efficiently and that type of thing. But basically, I'm not sure it's bigger than the computer. I mean, that was a really big one when computers came along. That was a really, really big one. But it is big. But I'll give you another example, one more, and then I'll get off this. We're going to go back a long way. AI may be big, It's not bigger than one that happened 5,500 years ago, called the wheel. Okay. I mean, think about that innovation. I mean, think about how that changed. Well, think about where we'd be today if we didn't have that capacity to enhance the efficiency of moving things. At the time the wheel was invented in Mesopotamia, they think about 5,500 years ago, the archaeologists tell us there were probably 10 million people on Earth at the time. The wheel got rid of probably 70% of the jobs at that time. I don't know what people did. I guess they just hauled stuff on their back. I don't know. But whatever they did, they didn't need to do it anymore. And but think how that has impacted the world and how much it's amplified and magnified what we do. And I guess the simplest statistic I would give you is today we have more technology than at any point in history. Today we have more people working than at any point in history. So, I mean, again, yes, it's going to displace, it's going to disrupt, and for your business, it's be prepared. You know, adapt it, grow with it, let it work for you is going to be the real key. But a friend of mine who was a famous economist who died a few years ago used to say when they started talking about efficiency and that sort of thing, he said it's going to be a long time before two people can play a string quartet. It's going to be a long time before you can do what you guys do without that human element on a broad scale. You know.
Thank you, Dr. Perryman. Sorry, am I too loud? Is it too loud? Oh, hi. One of the questions that I have is that I'm in the property management division, and what I've seen is that a lot of owners are trying to look into buying and they can't afford to sell their property, so of course they look into renting their property out. What I'm concerned about is what are the next few years looking like for those type of sellers or owners? What does that look like with the growth of San Antonio, New Braunfels, and what does that look like for you?
Yeah, well, again, it's going to be challenging. I mean, there's no question it's going to be challenging, and I don't want to minimize that. As you've probably seen, the townhouse and condo market is really dead right now. I mean, compared to single family, and I think that's a reflection of some of that. Part of that is those 3% mortgages a few years ago have trapped a lot of people. I mean, you know, they would like to move up. They would like to have a bigger house or whatever, but they can't swap 3 for 7. You know, and it would just kill them. And particularly if they're looking to upsize, that makes it particularly difficult. So you know, that inertia's there. I mean that inertia's clearly there. That's going to be an issue for a while. As interest rates come down, it becomes less of an issue because the spread is less and that sort of thing. I think again, you know, you're going to see market responses like the plan that they were talking about at D.R. Horton. You know, again, under certain circumstances in certain ways, very low interest rate. You know, those, I think you'll see more of that kind of thing to try to address that and try to bring those people into the market. But it's not going to happen overnight. I mean, it's going to take a while. There's going to be some people who are kind of trapped in that situation of not being able to sell their home and you know, wanting to move up and that type of thing. I think you're going to see that for a while. And again, that's kind of the blessing and the curse of the 3% mortgages. It was great for a while. But then it does make it very difficult for people to transition in a market with higher rates.
Last one we got was from the online stream. Okay. They're asking for your comments on affordable housing in Texas.
We desperately need more of it. It's my comment on affordable housing in Texas. And again, that's where a lot of the 300,000 houses that were short in Texas comes from. You know, the legislature did a few things. It gets very dicey and very difficult, and you guys have to deal with it, I'm sure, on both sides of the issue. I mean, you start talking about infill housing, you start talking about smaller lots, you start talking about allowing people to build another unit on their lot. You know, those kind of things help solve affordable housing problems, but they also mess with neighborhoods. And so there's that yin and yang and back and forth on that. But I do think we have a fair amount of inventory of like smaller townhomes, condos, that sort of thing right now. But unfortunately, they're all at price points that don't solve the affordable housing crisis. Some type of program that would allow some type of subsidization of transition into those is something that might work, but the legislature is focused on it, trying to deal with it. There was, again, some progress. You guys, as I say, had a good session. There was some progress made in the last session, but it is a definite problem situation for Texas, and part of it is, and you face this here, you know, your per capita incomes they're not terrible here, but they're lower than the national average. They're lower than the state average, and so that kind of puts more people in that kind of struggling to get to that stage of a living arrangement. So yeah, I mean, I can't tell you it's going to go away anytime soon, but there's a laser focus on it right now. I can tell you that.
Push your contacts to bring back the first-time homebuyer credit. That was great for us in 2012. We'd love that again. Y'all give it up for Dr. Perryman. Thank you so much. I'm sure he's going to be hanging out for a little bit, so if you have more questions, come up and see him. I'm sure he'd love to meet you. Oh, he's not, so never mind. Anyways, but he'll be back here at the 1 o'clock. Guys, again, there's successes out there. It just takes the activity, so lean into it. Y'all have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see y'all soon.